I'd like to call to order the special meeting of the Charter Standing Committee. It's Tuesday, August 20th, 2024 at 10:01 a.m. Roll call, please. I remembered it this time.
Trustee Butler,
Here.
trustee Lewis,
Here.
and Neil McChesney is also here, and Michael Tucker is on Zoom.
Great, thank you. Nice to see you, Michael. General information, the Board of Education will provide reasonable accommodations for persons with disabilities planning to attend a Board of Education meetings who contact the County Superintendent's Office Assistant at least 24 hours before the meeting at 925-942-3380. Also, any disclosable public records related to an open session item on an agenda and distributed by the county superintendent to a majority of the members of the county committee less than 72 hours before the public hearing are available for the public inspection at the Contra Costa County Office of Education, 77 Santa Barbara Road, Pleasant Hill, California, and will be made available at the public hearing. Public
Seeing none.
We will move on then to action items. Approval of the agenda. Is the agenda acceptable?
Yes, the agenda is fine.
Okay, by consensus, we will approve the agenda. Approval of the minutes. That is fine. We will hold the minutes till the next meeting. Just gonna make a note so I remember that. Okay, moving along briskly here. We're gonna go into the discussion of the MOU template and Schedule A review. This is a business action item. Hopefully we will be able to approve these today. Mr. McChesney, would you like to begin the discussion on it?
Sure, it'd be my pleasure. Good morning. Attached, if for your review are the most recent versions of these documents. We have some areas that I think were discussed last time that still need clarification in terms of kind of moving forward with a final version for board review. I can go through those here. I've noted them that I think are the only areas where there were still questions about how you want to proceed. I also made sure that Mr. Tucker's here as well, because I think any questions for legal will be important to address. The goal here, of course, is to have a document that we can submit to the board for a first reading at their next meeting.
Please.
Okay, if we want to start with the MOU itself.
Quick question. There's
Please.
blue and there's red, and what's the difference?
I think red was me and blue was Tucker originally, or something
Ah.
like that. We tried in the version you have now, we have kind of inline comments. Annette, you might want to look at the one that was attached most recently. I think you're looking at the one Natalia first attached.
Oh, so is it changed then from that?
It's not changed. I think it's a little easier to read with the inline in terms of how it looks.
I'll look at the one on here on the screen if we need to then.
But the first place where there's still a kind of question for discussion is page 6, and that would be the proposed video recording piece, which, as you can see in this version, is redlined for not including, but I know that was a point of question for the board.
Yeah, right there.
Right there at the bottom.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
I brought this up last time. And then there was conversation about what was required by Ed Code, and I was never saying anything about what was required by Ed Code. I was saying that, like the LA County MOU, they have in their MOU that they require the charters to also record their meetings, period, as well as taking written minutes. And I was suggesting we could also do that.
Well, I think that while it can be convenient to have that, I think making it a requirement could be cumbersome on some of our charters to make that a part of every meeting. If you stop and think of some of our smaller charters, it could be a problem. And then also when we have issues when technology fails us, which it has for us, even ourselves, that what are we going to do if they say, well, it didn't work? Well, then it didn't work.
But right now, they're not required to do it at all. A lot of them have their meetings on Zoom, and it's not that hard to push record, and then you've got the recording. You know, you don't even have to have it public on their public website, but it could be a reference for us, you know, for just to know that they have a recording if there's a question about what the discussion was. Anyway,
I
it
think,
doesn't have to be in the template for everyone, but we could consider it. Like, I would think most of them have their meetings on Zoom in addition to in person. So anyway.
not everybody uses Zoom. Some of them use different formats.
Okay,
And some of them are more difficult to do that recording. And since we're now required to have people in person, like, then it's a little bit more difficult for some of them, smaller ones especially, to manage to do everything being recorded.
okay.
So I
Well, it
think-
could
I
be
think
a
that-
charter by charter
Yeah.
decision.
Well,
whether
this
we
is
ask
an,
for this.
this is an overall template that we are doing though, is the thing. It's not
Right.
one where we're going to be renegotiating each line. I personally think that I would prefer to see it removed.
Well,
And if we-
maybe Neil, you could explain when we do ask a charter to adopt our MOU, we're having individual conversations with that charter. This could be something we could ask for on the bigger charters if we know it's not a big problem for them.
Theoretically, each of your MOUs is going to go through some kind of phase where there's some back and forth between the charter and the authorizer post approval of a renewal or an initial petition. I think one note in terms of how to approach individual requirements or changes in the MOU, Natalia, if you will scroll up all the way, I think, to the second page up. By the way, yeah. This was kind of, I think, in the original concept right here, but it was really never used. Schedule A, we know what that is. Schedule B is a place perhaps where you might have specific, unique conditions or other language as an appendix to your standardized template, right? So in other words, again, hypothetically, to your point, Trustee Butler, if you had a situation where you wanted to add a video recording requirement, I think my preference, I guess, in terms of process would be to put something like that in Schedule B rather than in the template itself. But ultimately, your choice.
And if you put it in the Schedule B, then where is it exactly? What do
To
you
be an
mean by that?
appendix, it would be a supplementary document, right? It was something we would create. It'd be like, you know.
Supplement to the MOU?
Mhm, mhm. So it's part of the
Okay.
document, just like Schedule A is. But to my knowledge, and I'm pretty sure this is accurate, you've never actually used Schedule B. What ended up happening is kind of you iterated on the standard template and made changes in the template from version to version. I like the approach of putting those kinds of unique, specific items in a Schedule B so that your standard MOU template remains the same, if that makes sense.
So I just want to say one other thing about this. It seems to me it would also make it easier for, like, say, we're telling our staff person to please attend, you know, and I know you do this, you attend some of the charter board meetings, but not necessarily all of them. But instead of having to go there to the meeting or whatever, then, or having to be available when the meeting happens, you could also have access to what the discussion was if there was an important discussion and you couldn't attend the meeting as a staff person. I would think it would also help you if they were, and I'm thinking of one charter in particular where even though they have it available to watch the meeting on Zoom, they had it set up in such a way you couldn't, it was all going through, when you were looking at the Zoom thing, it was all going through the one person's picture. You couldn't tell who was talking unless you happen to recognize their voice, you know, because it wasn't, they didn't have it a mic for each person. So that makes it difficult. And, you know, yet they did have Zoom. So if you had a recording, you could, if there was an important conversation, you could, you know, access it and and listen back to it. And I didn't say it had to be on the public website. I was saying just to ask them to make a recording so that it would be available if it was needed, which is what the LA County MOU has. So yeah, that is fine with me if we put it into that charter specific conditions, and it could be brought up charter by charter when we wanted to ask for that. What
But-
about,
and
what
what
about
would-
that?
What would be the criteria to say, we want you to record, but we're not requiring them to record?
Well, you just said some of them don't have, they're not all in Zoom. Maybe they have a different platform. Maybe they're smaller and they don't have much technology access. Then maybe you wouldn't require that charter to record it. And the bigger ones where it's not a problem, yeah, go ahead and record it. I mean, that would be a conversation for our board when we're saying, yes, go ahead with this MOU, with this charter. I mean, we're going to have the conversation, are we renewing their petition? And it's related to renewing the petition, but let's make sure these things are in the MOU. And
This MOU is also what we would use if we have somebody who appeals to us and wants to, that we don't already have as a charter under our purview.
right,
And so what would we use as a determining factor to say that they have to record their minutes or their meetings as opposed to you don't have to?
well, you would have that conversation when, I don't know what charters might appeal to us, but when the charter appeals to us and then you're going through the review of the petition, and are you going to recommend to approve the petition? And then since you're doing that, you're going to have this MOU. Then you have the conversation about, is whatever we were concerned about covered in the MOU? Do we want to add the recording piece to that one? Yeah, I know you didn't, I'm not,
I can think of several small ones that potentially could come to us. And then we're asking them what they've got, maybe one grade level per grade, or one classroom per grade.
Hmm.
That's a pretty small group, and you're asking them to add essentially another layer to their administration of a meeting, and
it creates more transparency. If it's a very small charter and there's one classroom, in that case, you wouldn't ask them to record.
But
I'm not,
I'm looking
you're
for, I'm
asking
looking
me
for
where's,
continuity is all.
okay, well, I think
Okay.
if they're big enough and they already have their meetings on Zoom or some other platform, whatever it is, and if it isn't a problem, it would make sense to ask them to make a recording.
So I'm gonna suggest this, that we bring this part to the board to ask whether they choose to have that as part of the MOU or not.
So in any place where there is an agreement or consensus from the committee, I can just leave the language in and highlight those areas for the entire board when I present.
Yeah, but also I think you should bring up, it could be in this Schedule B
Sure.
thing. It doesn't have to be.
I
in the
can,
main
I can
body.
explain how that kind of construct will work in general. Yeah.
Yeah, because, you know, as I say, each charter, when you're renewing their petition, you're also saying yes, and be sure to have the MOU, or let's add, I mean, it's also an opportunity for us to say, you know, here's an area that's weak in the charter, but I think we need, you know, that you might end up wanting to add something to the MOU for a particular charter because maybe there's some area of the petition that's lacking, right? Unless we're going to tell them to change their petition. I don't know. Can we do that even?
Not really. That is really where you would get a Schedule B, conceptually speaking, right? Where
Yeah.
you see some deficiency or area of concern and you want to stipulate additional language or conditions. I think that's the place to put it. Just
Yeah.
in general.
Yeah.
Whether that applies to the video recording thing, that's your prerogative, but.
Okay, very good.
Okay, on to the next one.
Please.
Page 8, Natalia. This is the expulsion appellate rights section. Right there, 9.6. So, you know, just to summarize, this section delineates the process by which appellate rights would apply if they existed. I think you're familiar with this conversation. I'll let you take it
Yes.
from here.
Yeah,
I can't remember what we concluded. I remember we talked about it.
What was concluded is that several of the, at least one I know of the charters refuse to accept that condition. And it is not something that is under education code that they're required. Each of them has to have their expulsion process within the charter, within their charter petition. And I guess that's the best we can say is that they're not gonna all accept it, and we have no way to enforce that they do it. Each of them.
Oh,
has-
wait, if the charter this situation, this MOU is about if we're considering revising an MOU or when the
Anyway.
charter has its petition in front of us, and then we're discussing whether to approve it or not and to adopt an MOU. So at that point, you could, regardless of what's in the charter, you could say, hey, I mean, I don't think that they should have this thing that some of them have in there now, which says that the student has basically no right for due process and
Well-
can't come back to the school if they're expelled.
I don't think that's an accurate statement, just to be clear.
I
They
don't think what I said, I don't feel like that should be in there.
I don't think that is in any of our charters, nor would it be lawful if it was.
If,
Well,
If a
then
parent-
we should be looking at that. But, okay, go ahead.
if a parent felt their child was not given due process, the parent could sue or use whatever means of, I guess arbitration or whatever is in the wording of the charter when a parent feels that their child was treated unfairly.
Can I offer just a quick clarification if it's okay? So for traditional, I don't want to say public schools because charter schools are public schools, but for the traditional school system, school districts, county offices of education, there's a compulsory right for students to attend those schools. For charter schools, it's not necessarily the case. They can draw students from all over the state. If you live near a charter school, they're not required necessarily to educate that specific student that lives nearby. So it's a little bit different when we have like a traditional school district where we have those what we call due process rights that attach to those students. It's not necessarily the same for students attending charter schools. That being said, the Charter Schools Act, it has within the last amendments, they made changes regarding how a charter school can, I'll just say involuntarily disenroll a student and certain rights and notices that have to be applied to that specific student as well. So it's gotten better. So not unlike other county offices have, you guys have had concerns that a student would be expelled from a charter school and have no recourse. I don't think that's necessarily the case anymore, although I certainly understand the concern. But I just wanted to provide that brief just clarification there, or context, I guess you could say.
So with that said, could you briefly summarize what is in the Charter School Act now? You just said there were revisions, so it's better than it was. But so what does it say now that's different? About expulsions, I mean.
Yeah, so it used to be the case where a student could be involuntarily disenrolled relatively quickly from a charter school. I am not totally aware of the circumstances. I can't really remember exactly what the language was, but there wasn't many protections in the Charter Schools Act to protect a student under those circumstances. Now it requires at the very least a notice. I'm going to grab the language right now while we're talking, Trustee Butler. Yeah. It requires a notice and oftentimes some sort of what we call like a hearing or a meeting. So we're talking about due process. Really, there's two components to it, to any form of due process. Some sort of notice, like in our case, we have a lot of documents that are required to go to students and their families when we're expelling a student. So that's what we consider like the notice provisions. Here's the charges you're facing. And then we have a second component, which is a hearing component. Sometimes it could be just a meeting between the school and the student. Other times it's a full-blown evidentiary hearing, which was what you'd expect to be more a traditional expulsion appeal. So they have something like that. It's not as robust as what is detailed under the education code for traditional school districts. But to expel a student, there is still some sort of process applied. And I'll just call it involuntary disenrollment because I think that applies as well. And typically, and Neil, you can help me if I'm mistaken here, but typically charter petitions do list the education code provisions that will apply to the charter school in the event of an expulsion. So I can't say this for certain, but I'm assuming most of them have expulsion-like procedures if they're going to actually expel a student for a disciplinary matter.
That is accurate. In fact, it is very commonplace, almost the standard, that charters petitions adopt education code for what is element 8, I believe, or whatever corresponding letter that is, which is
Yeah.
your suspension and expulsion procedures. So in other words, they look, and I believe this is the case for all 8 of our charter schools, they look identical to education code outside of the one layer, which is appeal rights to the county. Now, some of our charters actually haven't kept that in, right? So they chose of their own volition to include that appellate right. The point is that they don't have to, and this is trying to mandate it for all.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, Neil. We are talking about this extra layer, which is the appellate right to the county board.
Right, which
Yeah.
haven't actually said that, but that's what the first sentence is, that they would, according to this, they would have, but it's stricken out, but they would have the appeal to the county board, the right to appeal to the county board. And I remember former trustee Fatima bringing that up. Can't think of her last name right now.
Ellen,
Ellen, yeah, trustee Ellen.
she and I had a lot of discussion over this one
Yeah.
when we put it into there. And
So
Part
I wasn't bringing that up to argue the point again about whether it should be appealed to us, but I feel like it should at least be more clear to parents, like the next sentence about in this parent handbook and all of that. Is that already the case, Neil? Do they already have to put information about the right of the rights when a student is expelled from the charter school, et cetera? They must have it. I know they have a discipline section in their parent handbook, but
So the charter petition itself, which is almost always a public document, must include all of the details about how suspension and expulsion procedures work. That is a required element of the petition. Furthermore, and this is part of what Mr. Tucker was discussing, in the last 5 years, there have been additional attempts from the state to protect parents and students from involuntary disenrollment, or, the kind of counseling out that is an unfortunate practice of, I think a minority of charter school operators. So there are required notices and even a complaint form that must be posted on a charter school's website. Those are relatively new requirements. Also something that I check all of our charters for and educate them about on an annual basis. But what is specifically included in whatever version of a handbook, parent handbook, student handbook, that there's some individual discretion on the part of the charter schools. I don't think. I think if you read the details of each petition about how suspension and expulsion work, there is a paper trail, documentation, and noticing that happens at every stage of student discipline as part of those approved procedures.
okay, so just one more question to you. Since the case that I'm thinking of, when there was a student expelled, they were specifically told they had to go to our community school, and then they couldn't get back. By chance, they couldn't get back. But the charter school had it written in their agreement that they would not accept the student back or something. But my question is, when a student is expelled from a charter school, can the charter school dictate where they go? Why couldn't the student have gone back to the local public school?
Yes, very good question. So when a student is expelled from a charter school, it is the district's decision as to whether they choose to re-enroll that student or not, or counsel them into the same kinds of programs and services that other district expelled students have access to. In this case, that's often the county community school, Golden Gate. I have, on several occasions when an expulsion has happened, helped coordinate between the charter school and county services to ensure that the parents are aware of that option for them. But they are also informed, and there's a requirement for the charter school to inform the district whenever a student disenrolls for any reason, including expulsion. But again, it is actually the district's decision as to whether they allow them to re-enroll in their whatever neighborhood school that they would otherwise attend, or not to, and actually kind of adopt the expulsion term and conditions that the charter impose in its expulsion decision. I think in addition, a student has the right to re-enroll in the charter school at the conclusion of their expulsion, if they've met the terms, et cetera, dependent on capacity. And that is, they don't have, really in depending upon how they write their policy, they can't necessarily override capacity standards that are in their petition if a student was expelled and they're continuing to enroll new students, et cetera, right? So that is the difference here. And really the only roadblock, I guess there's another option, right? If the board of the charter school determined that they did not meet the terms of their conditions for expulsion, and I think in some cases they have language about, I know it's capacity, and I think it's also, maybe it's just those two, capacity and terms of expulsion, right? Did they meet all those terms and finalize their expulsion plan?
So capacity though, say the student wants to come back, I mean, if they're doing a lottery, I mean, does the student have preference above the lottery, assuming they're still enrolling students for that grade? Or are we talking about they're down at the bottom of the lottery or something?
Not necessarily. It depends on their lottery. You would have to have a preference written into your admission policy for expelled students, and I doubt that is the case for anybody. So they would be treated like a new student enrolling.
Well, then that would be something that would have, to me, that's something they could revise their expulsion process to say, if you are expelled and you fulfill the terms and then you want to come back, they could be allowing them back, assuming they are enrolling students, not necessarily at the bottom of the lottery. But, that's, now we're getting into the weeds, I'm just saying. But in terms of going back, like say the student fulfilled their expulsion plan and then they wanted to go back to the charter. If the charter didn't let them in, theoretically, they can go back to the public school.
Yes, and that was, I think, the point that Mr. Tucker was trying to make at the beginning of his comments, whereby every student in our community has a right to a public education at the district school that's provided for them. That basic fundamental right does not transfer to the charter school necessarily. They have a right to access, to apply, but not necessarily to attend.
This is being a school of choice, it's handled differently, just like any other school of choice can determine how they will handle it. So I think what we have to take this back to is we're discussing whether we are going to try to keep this language in here that they have a right to appeal to us. And legally.
Yeah,
They
if they
don't.
don't have a legal right, then we don't put that in, but let's make sure we pay attention to expulsion situations going forward in terms of, whether it's a petition or what.
That's one of the things we need to read when we're reading the petition, because the expulsion process is outlined in those.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we'll leave that one out.
Okay, moving on to page 17. This is in the material revision section. This was around additional sites, expansion, et cetera. So we had some lengthy discussion about this. I pointed to education code and how it kind of delineates this part of what is considered a material revision. And Natalia, maybe I could have you actually Google some education code for me so the trustees can see it, because I know that came up. Page 17, right there, 22.1.5. I amended it to reflect education code. Yes, if you could, there's two references, education code 47605A4. You just bring up 47605, and 47607 is the other. So you can kind of see what that language is. Again, this is one of the specific examples of where education code actually calls something out as a material revision. In most cases, it does not clarify that, but this is a place where it does. Does not mean you can't go beyond in detail. I just am pointing you to what the language says. So A4 right there, maybe you could highlight it. A4, yep, right there, so that the trustees can read that section. So after receiving approval of its petition, a charter school that proposes to expand operations to one or more additional sites or grade levels shall request a material revision to its charter, et cetera, et cetera. And then 47607. I can read it for you while she's finding it, but it says, in similar fashion, a charter school that concurrent with its renewal proposes to expand operations to one or more additional sites or grade levels shall request a material revision to its charter. A material revision of the provisions of a charter petition may be made only with the approval of the chartering authority, and it's governed by 47605. So just pointing out that language, because that was requested that I do so last time. And this is a place where there was some discussion and we just need clarification moving forward. A3, yeah, right there at the top. Yep. So it's very similar language.
So it's essentially what you've changed this from is saying changes to location of facilities. Essentially removing that part and clarifying it's expanding operations to one or more additional sites. I do appreciate the changing of that because we have charters that have had to move sites many times because of the location that the local school district says they have available for them. So I think the clarification of that saying just expanding operations to one or more additional sites as opposed to the prior language is a good change.
Well, I don't agree with you, but I think that, you know, a satellite facility is one thing, but if you're moving your entire school from one facility to another place, that's a big change for the school, and we are the authorizer. I feel like it's fine to leave changes to location of facilities in there.
But when West Contra tells one of the schools that's co-located at a campus, well, we don't have room for you this year there, we'll offer you this space. They would then have to do a material revision each time that happens. And how often has West Contra moved students' campuses around?
I mean, I know for at least one of our charters, it's happened. You know, and right now, currently, we have one charter in a Prop 39 agreement, right? Where,
West
and
Contra.
they have, I think, still just I don't believe they've got a multi-year facilities agreement. So at any given time, right, that could happen. Prop 39 is the most obvious example of a really problematic application of what your current language says. I do want to be clear to Trustee Butler's point that if we were to change to what I've proposed in the language, which is what education code says, it would also mean that a charter school operating in a private facility that found a different location, a better lease, name your scenario, could close that school, reopen in another location without a material revision, right? So we're really changing from, sorry, I'm using that word too much. We're altering from change location to add, right? It's very specifically in education code, the addition of. I'm opening a second campus or, you know,
Yeah.
growing across
Yeah.
the street and buying property, whatever it is. So I just want to be
Understood.
clear about what.
But we're not saying they can't do it. We're just saying then being a material revision just means it would have to come to our board for us to review and discuss. And it's just it's a layer of review as an authorizer. It's a big thing to change from one location to another. I think it's important to leave it in there. I think it's good to have that level of transparency. Changing location. I mean, we're not deciding here, we're making a recommendation to our board about what we think should be in our MOU. I think it's better to leave it in there. So maybe that's one that goes forward without consensus unless you want to continue to discuss it.
I think that what we're going to be doing, because length of time for a material revision to be reviewed.
90 days.
We're looking at a whole long process that we have to go through when potentially a school district says, I'm sorry, we no longer have room on that campus. You now have to go to this school if you'll go on somewhere. Because
So there's only one charter school that I can think of that is one of our authorized charter schools that has changed locations during the 6 years that I've been on this board. It's not like it would happen all the time. So I don't know. And usually a change like that, they're going to do it at the same time as a, you know, as a petition review. And then it's just part of the petition.
well, the location's not going to usually be part of the petition usually, or the
Well,
renewal.
So to be
I don't
clear,
know.
this is a part where I've tried to make sure that we do this the right way moving forward when and if it occurs. Material revisions must be handled separately than the renewal petition. So they could happen concurrently, but they would be two separate processes with two separate decisions, two separate public hearings, things like that, right? So you could, and it is logical that some people talk about location changes at the time of renewal, but they would be separate decisions.
Manzanita Middle moved several times well, or was that when they were still under West contract?
Yes, not since we've been their authorizer. They have moved several times in their existence. You know, other examples are Invictus through Prop 39 and Caliber through their new campus. So those are some examples.
The Caliber isn't likely to move again, right? Don't they own
don't-
the facility where they are?
I think it's technically a long-term lease.
Okay.
I believe with maybe it's like a kind of lease to own deal where at the end of the 30 years they become the owners or something like that.
Yeah, well, it's totally different than a Prop 39.
Right.
Invictus was the one I was thinking of that moved. But they also were apparently approved without any facility because that was before, I don't know what year that was, but it was before, they apparently didn't have to have a facility listed in their petition when they applied because it wasn't there.
There's technically no requirement to identify a specific site. I think what the petition is required is general parameters for site needs. There's been several petitions that have been approved without a specific site identified.
Okay, well, anyway, so Invictus is the only one that I know of that actually moved in the last 6 years. So-
Theoretically, would you consider making Waves a move when they went from one, even if it was just kind of like across the street? And they built their new campus?
You know, I don't know if they already owned the entire property or if there was an acquisition some point, and certainly they have expanded and there are different buildings. So, you know, I don't know. Probably lawyers could tell us how you might interpret that, but that would be an interesting one.
Yeah, so and the previous language also including school sites, resource centers, and meeting space. So if they decide
So maybe
to,
we'd cross that out.
well, I do think that
Resource
expanding is
centers.
what we're talking about that really makes the big difference.
Well, expanding, he pointed out, is already in the law. If you add a site, that's already in the ed code. They must have do a material revision process. What we're talking about here is after that, changes to location of facilities. I think you could leave that including school sites, leave that. You could cross out resource center, meeting space, or other satellite facility.
What would be the exact language?
The sentence
Yes,
that's
that's what's
there,
needed.
expanding operations to one or more additional sites. I mean, that next sentence actually right now doesn't have a verb. It just says changes. It could have a comma and say including changes to location of facilities, school sites, and school sites, period. And then cross out the rest of it. I don't know, including the opening of a new facility, that sounds like the same thing as expanding operations to one or more sites. That's the same thing, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's
I
already
think just
covered.
I want to be sure I understand where the hang up is. That I think there are two versions of this. One that is very strictly expanding, just by definition means the addition of. And the other is change, which could mean closing one spot and opening up another. And I just want to be clear, that is that the difference that we're discussing?
Difference with what?
How you want this language to read. If it is expanding,
That's already included. That's already there. It's not crossed out here.
correct.
What we're discussing is the words that you have crossed out, which says changes to location of facilities.
Right. So you want the
including
word
school sites.
change back in because that would indicate someone closing one site and opening up another, not
Yeah.
just adding.
It should say including changes to location of facilities or school sites, something like that, because you mentioned facilities and school sites. I don't know, it's really school sites. What does facilities mean if it's not school site?
This was the original language.
Right.
I didn't write it.
Yeah, okay. Well, you could cross out the rest of the sentence after that, but I want to leave in including changes to location of facilities and school sites.
Well, so I think including both the word expand and change is confusing. It's it could be both expanding and or changing. But then again, that brings in the Prop 39 scenario. It brings in the scenario where a private site is closed and a new lease at a new location is opened. Expanding is I'm adding. So that's and I know this is a bit of a semantic exercise, but I think that's really important clarification.
So what are you saying? You want that in a separate sentence? I mean, right now
Well-
it is a separate sentence. We could leave it a separate sentence, but I was saying the sentence that says changes to location of facilities, including school sites, there's no verb in that sentence. It's just a phrase hanging out there.
Right. I'm worried less about how to write it. I just want to make sure I understand your positions, and maybe I'll put it a different way. Trustee Lewis, you're saying you're okay with the expanding, which is the adding of an additional site.
Okay.
Trustee Butler,
Yeah.
you're saying if a school closes one site and opens up another site, that should be a material revision. Is that
Also,
accurate?
yes, I
Yes.
agree with trustee Lewis on the first point. Yes, if they add a site, that's a material revision. In addition, I think that it should also be a material revision if they close one site and move to another site.
Understood. So if that's one where we need to bring it to the full board, I can highlight those differences. Otherwise, feel free to continue to discuss.
No, I think we should bring it to the full board.
Got it.
It gives us more, it's more transparent for us and more, we're the authorizer.
Okay, then I will move on to the last one, which is still on page 17. This was, it's 23.1 renewal timing. What I did, I think, was actually the lightest touch, which was to simply remove the September 1st piece. I am okay with this version. There was also discussion about kind of removing that entire sentence so that the fiscal year reference was not part of it as well. Whereas like we had some discussion about last time, there are scenarios where charters are trying to submit even earlier, given the appellate timelines, things like that. But I'm okay with this version. I'll leave it at that.
I'm forgetting what the issue here is in this paragraph.
Well,
The issue was that you were trying to dictate the earliest they could submit a charter renewal as September 1st, and that's problematic.
Oh.
So at least what we agreed on as a committee, I believe, was removing September 1st. The original
Where's
suggestion,
September 1st, I don't see.
it's
it
in
here.
red, the part that's crossed out. Under
Well, I don't see any
23.1.
red. We're looking at blue.
23.1.
Oh, the paragraph
23.1.
above. Okay, no wonder I'm not seeing it.
What was originally suggested was that you just get rid of everything after CCCOE and the county board. So the whole no sooner than September 1st of the fiscal year in which the would cease operations without renewal. So you don't dictate any timeline whatsoever. You know, that's probably the most aggressive touch here. I could go either way from my perspective.
I don't think this is too big a deal, but why, is there something in the law that says the timing or what?
No,
You
in
said it's
fact-
problematic to say September 1st, and why is that exactly?
Because there's nothing in the law that supports dictating a timeline. In fact,
Oh.
and I shared the memo from CDE with you via email after the meeting. The
Right.
state has been suggesting charters submit early because of the appellate timeline.
Hmm.
And even in our charter training, Mr. Patterson was talking about kind of that like example timeline where it can take an entire year to get
Yeah.
through the entire process.
So
So
this, by crossing this out, this would allow them to submit in August.
this would allow them to submit July 1st. There are some,
But we don't, that's fine, but we don't want them to submit the year before, like April, the previous year or something. Is there anything we can do about that?
I think you're trying to provide some guidance around timing here by putting the fiscal year, which is already really what code kind of
Okay,
reflects.
okay.
But the scenario that I'm worried about, although really I don't think it will be ever a problem for us as a county, it will be a problem for districts, is what happens when a charter school does submit in April.
Mhm.
What do you do?
Get
What-
stuck with sometimes not enough time, and then we were, in the past, we had to boot one up to the state.
Right, there's that
It's like there's
scenario.
not enough time to-
There's also, right, like, I don't know, Mr. Tucker might even comment here. Can I legally write a letter back to this petitioner and say, I'm sorry, I can't accept your petition yet? Or does the timeline in statute start regardless once that document comes across my desk? And I think it's an area of law that's unclear and untested. So I just don't love getting ourselves into that situation. Again, I'm really probably too concerned about the detail here. I think at the least we omitted September 1st. We're agreed on that. I think that's probably fine, but I just wanted to raise what we discussed last time. Mr. Tucker, anything to add?
Yeah, it does start on submission, but realistically, what typically ends up happening, if you're not ready for it, or you've capacity issues with the review timeline, or whatever circumstances that are prevalent at the moment that would prevent you from abiding by the timelines in the Charter Schools Act, usually charter petitioners are pretty receptive to that. So I don't know if I've ever seen one forced upon you, like, here, you have to review this, do it right now, and we don't care what your circumstances are, but it could conceivably happen. So to answer your question specifically, it does start, as far as I'm aware, upon submission.
So shouldn't we add a word there, no sooner than during the fiscal year?
I don't know that you
Wouldn't
need
that
that.
be more clear?
I don't know that it needs that. I think the point though, Mr. Tucker's making is if somebody gives it to you in April, even though your MOU says the fiscal year, what happens then? The timeline begins regardless, Mr. Tucker, or you're in a legal dispute, you got to go through your, dispute resolution process. Like it's just a gray area that's a little concerning.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like I said, I think practically speaking, charter petitioners, they do not want to upset the authorizer unnecessarily, understanding that their petition is in the hands of their authorizer. So I just, practically speaking, would we ever see an issue like this come up where they're sort of forcing it upon you and violating an MOU? I mean, that's not a great way to start your renewal process. Just sort of from a practical lens. Yeah, I think you're right though, Neil. I think, yeah, you would kickstart just kind of like legal dispute over the MOU language. And whether or not they're too early on it, but I just have a hard time seeing that scenario playing out, to be honest with you. Although it could, it's certainly a possibility.
It's entirely possible that they could violate anything else in the MOU also.
Right.
So
Correct.
I do like removing the September 1st and leaving that it is within the fiscal year. And if someone chooses to then say, well, we want to give it to you early, then it could be very well that they have, as Mr. Tucker said, created a bit of hostility there.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to not judge based upon our feelings, but it can be pretty hard to, I would expect that any authorizers would know that. Wouldn't be.
Well,
the-
yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you, trustee Lewis. But the other point is we should make sure they know that our MOU says this, right? Do they automatically know that, or you tell them in a meeting?
They
or
sign the
something?
document. I assume they're gonna
Oh,
read
no,
it.
but they're gonna sign it after we do the petition review.
Yeah. But they're
They,
aware
but
of
they,
every
they've
word of it.
hopefully have signed the last version too, right? Which also says this. But yes, there's,
Right, we'll
there is a
remind
ton of
them,
communication
know,
about renewal
remind them.
submissions.
Say you have a District 1 that's coming or whatever, just remind them. Don't assume they remember. That's all.
This is gonna sound probably like, I guess a stupid question, but it was one thing that came to mind as I was reading this. Do all so if their renewal comes up, does everybody cease essentially their fiscal year in the end of June, beginning of July?
Yes.
And so, okay, so none of these would be that we have somebody who's a mid-year
No.
that has to be reviewed by, okay.
No.
I didn't get a chance to look at all the dates of when they were approved and what the timing was, so that was just something that crossed my mind.
Okay,
So
I
are
think
we-
we're good there. That was the last item that I had in this document that there was any meaningful discussion about. So unless there's something else in the document trustees had questions about.
I did have a few. Did you have some you wanted to cover first, trustee
No,
Butler?
you go ahead.
Let me just gotta scroll through these. Oh, okay, so, under independent study, item 17.1. Does independent study, long-term independent study need to be part of the charter petition if they're going to be adding this, and would that make it a material revision, or do all of our charters have the option for long-term independent study in there?
So the term, the length of independent study is less the kind of meaningful factor than what education code calls out for charters in terms of how they generate ADA overall. What I mean by this is so long as your independent study generated ADA, short or long term, is less than 20% of your annual ADA, you are a classroom-based program, and as long as your policies around independent study are compliant with law, then you can operate as such. If you go above that 20%, you have to go to the state for what's called a funding determination in order to operate as a non-classroom based program, at least in part. And if you don't do that, you don't get your money, you can't run. So if you are any one of our charter schools that are, I think, almost all classroom-based programs, what matters to us and what they should reflect in their petition is that their independent study policy will comply with law, right? All the legal requirements therein. If you were to change from a non-classroom based program from a classroom-based program to a non-classroom based program, have to go for a funding determination. To me, that could trigger a material revision based on kind of, significant fundamental portion of your educational program shifting in a meaningful way. And we can look at the material revision section there in that respect. But does that answer your question?
So this comes from the material for subsequent agenda item where I noticed that Coco Spa was actually talking about having independent study, which I'm not sure if they've had that before, and brings it to, is that a material revision.
Yeah.
For them to do
Is,
that.
is there a section here that
So that's why I'm asking
we're looking at? that's about
17.
whether essentially
17?
Yes.
17.1.
Section 17. So all of our charter petitions have language in them about independent study.
Thank you.
And
that's
all
the-
of them have the ability to grow or shrink their independent study programs applicable with the language in their petitions and law. So what SPA is doing is similar to what Clayton Valley did with their Eagle Eye program a couple years ago, and what other schools have done really post-COVID in kind of catering to a portion of their population that is maybe not ready or not most viable in a classroom-based setting. Again, they went over 20%, there would be a significant issue, both for them operationally and perhaps for us as their authorizer.
Okay, that answers my question completely. Thank you.
Well, I wondered the same thing about our Cocoa Spas situation, but you just said if they go over 20%. So that's in the law or,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. They wouldn't get paid. They wouldn't get paid by the state if they went over 20% and didn't have a funding determination. So
Mhm.
no operator would do that.
Mhm.
It would be reckless. It would not work out for them.
Okay, and so they have to keep track of their numbers of enrolled students and send them to the state, or do they send them to us?
So
or
it's the
what?
way you claim your ADA in your record
Uh-huh.
keeping. In your traditional classroom-based attendance system, you're checking kids that are in the seats off every day. Independent study is a work-based attendance, right? So you collect work product, you associate that with a time that it took, and that's how you generate your ADA for that kind of student. That all comes out in the audit on an annual basis. And if you have a problem in the audit, some of that money might be clawed back. There might be other findings that come out of that. So that's how that works.
Okay,
I think the rest of mine, as I scroll through here, are formatting issues.
Yes, we need to do some cleanup.
So yeah, 33, should that be 33.1 to match the formatting of?
It will take some time because there are just layers of formatting
Okay,
problems here,
no,
but
okay.
I've noted all of the formatting issues. Yes, there's some numbering ones, there's some tabs, there's some other issues. We'll clean all
Okay,
of those
so
up.
number 29 is part of it been removed, but there still says at the very end, pursuant to section, and then there's nothing there, non-assignment. Pursuant to section, the number had been removed, but it needs to be the pursuant to section 23 or whatever it says there, it needs to be completely removed.
Okay, we'll figure that one out.
There's, let's see, there are, number 28 above it, where it says be brought in the appropriate in Contra Costa County. Shall
Yeah.
be brought in Contra Costa County, probably.
Yeah, I'll ask Mr. Tucker about that one when we go through.
And
one
what they
final
did is
time.
remove, yeah. And then, there's a couple places I noticed where you went through and got almost all of them where it said Cal Ed code, but there are still a few that still say the cal.ed.
Okay,
So you probably want to search that and find those.
yep.
And that is the end of mine.
so I just noticed another thing I wanted to ask about. It's 20.2, the reserve levels. Because it
Mhm.
had said 3%, and I remember before, I thought we had 3% in one place, 4% in another place, but this takes it out completely and says it has to be equivalent to that of a school district of similar size. Well, school districts have very specific,
That's where that 3 and 4% comes from. So what we are doing is we are referencing the California Code of Regulations that stipulates those percentages. The problem here is that you put 3% in the MOU when it depends on the size of the school. SPA is a perfect example, right? We've talked about this at length. Their MOU says 3%, but then Schedule A references the California Code of Regulations, and it's actually 4% for their size of school. So by changing this language to just reflect California Code of Regulations, the applicable percentage will apply for the size of school that the MOU pertains to. So that's It's absolutely reflecting the same standard for reserves, but it's correcting an issue when it comes to 3% here, 4% there, or
Mhm.
less or more in some cases.
But I was also thinking school district budgets are very different than charter school budgets. So when you said it's 3%, 3% is the kind of known base level for a school district, right?
Depends on the size of the district. It's, or school, really, I should say.
So based on, like, if it's a really small school district,
Mhm.
like some of the rural
So
school
this-
districts, it
there
might be even
is-
2%? Is that what you're saying?
3% might be the lowest. I can't remember.
3%.
But it does go up to 4 and 5% based on different sizes.
Yeah.
There is no law that requires a reserve minimum for charter schools. So we're taking law that applies to districts based on size and trying to apply it to a charter as a best practice. I think it's a sound idea. And, but if you go to Schedule A, it actually lists them. You
Yeah, it
can
does.
see it there.
I've
Yeah.
got it up here, right here. It says 0 to 300, greater of 5% or 80,000. 301 to 1,000, greater of 4% or 80,000. 1,001 to 30,000 is 3%.
Right. So it's 3, 4, or 5, depending upon the size.
Okay, so if you're smaller, that's where you need a higher percent.
Correct.
Yes, because you got, yeah.
All right, so I guess that's fine.
Did you have any other points that you wanted to bring up?
No, except that, my general comment before about, I don't know if we're talking about Schedule A here, but.
We're talking about
so-
the MOU right now.
Yeah, well, in the MOU, earlier he scrolled down and saw Schedule A and B, and I just still feel like we should, well, I was glad you put that thing on the last thing that shows all the dates of when things were submitted. That's a start. Let's keep doing that. In terms of, Schedule A tells you when things are submitted. So. But we don't have a paragraph about that here, right? I
No,
don't
what?
see it here, even at the end, even though you had it on the
Paragraph
screen.
about what?
We don't have any paragraph about put in Schedule A, something or other, any reference to Schedule A here.
In the MOU?
Right,
Oh, yeah, there's references to Schedule A,
okay.
in a variety of places.
Okay, well,
And the Schedule A is an appendix 2.
I just was looking for tell me where one of them is.
Well, I
so
just
can
happen to
look.
be looking at 21.4. It's also in
2.4.
21.1.
2.4 is listed twice.
It's-
5 required documentation, it mentions it, 5.1, 5.2. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Okay, so since it's all references Schedule A, so we do have the, so is Schedule A or part of the, I was gonna say, part of the MOU discussion? I mean, we don't have that on, or do we have that on our agenda?
Yeah, I
today?
figured we would move to that next.
Oh, okay, got it. All right, I'll stop talking about Schedule A.
So just to summarize, we will clean up formatting and catch any of those innocuous errors. I will bring this forward for the board, probably do some kind of summary, and I will highlight, I think, the 2 remaining areas where there wasn't consensus from the committee, which was the video recording piece and the material revision piece. And you can have board discussion, and hopefully we can go from there.
Do you think it would be possible to, and this may be a lot of work that is unnecessary, but to summarize the things that were taken out specifically, or?
Yeah, I can try to do a high level summary of what was cleaned up and or omitted. I mean, I'm going to leave, unless you disagree, I'm going to leave this in its relatively current form, other than a couple little cleanups, so that they can see
Yeah,
um,
that's a good
for
idea.
themselves what was changed. So,
Yeah.
but I'll give it a summary too,
Yeah, then if we can have one with the changes and then.
in a clean
the
version.
Document,
Yep,
yes, because
sure.
it get confusing whether which one
Yep.
you're reading, so. All right,
Happy to do that.
thank you very much.
Okay, then I'm ready to go to Schedule A if you.
Woohoo, Schedule A.
I guess just some big picture notes for this document. And then I really only have one area where I want to get some direction from the committee. I changed there's also formatting issues that need to be addressed with this one as well. But I took out the last column of the table that was discussed. You can see throughout, I've changed the language to submitted to CCOE instead of email. I've also taken out the in petition references based on that conversation. And really the only specific question I have and I've left this comment in there, the last page is around the certifications. This just doesn't make sense, and it's the way this document is being used currently. What I'd like to do is fold the certifications up into the table as submissions, so that it's not like the way this is contemplated here, right? This is an actual page where they're initialing and signing. That's not how we use this document. So I want to make these submissions in the rest of the table. So just kind of envelop them in the rest. So we're still doing them, of course, but they submit a certification on Epicenter right now for all of these things. So that's it, really. There wasn't much substantive that was changed here. It's more formatting, but I'll answer any questions.
Yeah, I think that, okay, I think the reason that this was included, and it doesn't mean it has to be kept there, is the certification that that they're agreeing to this. I certify the certifications, certifications are complete for the school year. And they all have the same due date. Does
Well, it's
that-
either prior to opening or August 1st. So you know what we do now. They do these exact certifications. They're actually called certifications in the platform. You can see them in that big
Okay.
list that I shared with you at the last board meeting. And it's like equivalent to like a DocuSign, right? They are signing, I certify that this has happened or whatever, just like they would initial here. It just happens in that platform rather than on a piece of paper. So I'm not at all suggesting that we don't still put these things in Schedule A. It's just the way it's formatted here as a separate like page where you sign things, as opposed to just like making just use the first one as an example, board trainings as one of those boxes up in the applicable section in the table above.
Okay,
So it's a formatting thing, really.
all right, so you are getting the certification
Correct.
through the system we now use that was not
Correct.
available when we did this. So, okay, I agree then. that-
And I would still qualify them as a certification when it's just putting them up in the table. So basically the table is an all exhaustive list of here's all the things that you have to submit and or do and or certify to. And then they submit them to us.
Great, thank you. I agree then about moving that up there.
So I have a question here about what this means on even starting on the first two, no, the second one, where it says posted on the charter website and it did say email, now it's submit to. So we get something submitted to us. Now it's through Epicenter. But is anyone checking their website? Because that's what it also says to see.
Yeah. So in most cases, what I have them submit is the thing and also a link to where it exists on their website. So we can cross-reference that.
And somebody looks at that
Mhm.
link. Okay. Because otherwise it wouldn't be right.
Auditing websites is a
Yeah,
regular
it can
and
change.
ongoing part of the work. Right? It happens all the time. And
I just wonder because a couple of times I've
yeah,
emailed you, they don't have such and such on some document, their site.
that's always
plan or-
helpful.
Yeah, yeah, could maybe, and I'm sure it can change, of course. So I just wondered about that. The other thing I wondered is, so we're not mentioning here anything about Epicenter, right?
No, and the reason is I'm not binding you to a specific tool. If
Okay.
if we choose a year from now that I don't like Epicenter anymore, we want to do something else, we can do that. The point is they're submitting all of these things on a regular basis by a certain time.
Thank you for doing that.
Well, I just want to say, I feel like the board should have more access to what they submit, like on Epicenter. And I know from going to that conference that that's totally possible. you know, so I just want to say that but it doesn't mean that we have to change Schedule A or change anything here. It's just something we should talk about. I don't want to slow that down because we also have another agenda item after this one, and we're going to run out of time.
My understanding is your intention has been to provide us that summary list more often. but part of your
Yeah,
session-
I mean, I can always give the committee or the board an update on that. That's pretty easy to generate.
Okay. Good.
So it sounds like we can,
Yeah.
I'll include this in the package, kind of summarize the changes there, and clean up any formatting issues.
Perfect. And we'll present it at the next board meeting.
And it will be for, do we need like a first reading? Or do you want to put it up for action at the board meeting? How do you want to approach that process
For the
wise?
Schedule A or for both
Both.
that?
Both.
So,
Just a reminder, we must be done. I mean, not must, but
October.
it really
Yeah.
would be smart to be done by October.
Yeah.
well, I think that I'm uncomfortable waiting to approve it till October.
You could always put it
that-
up for action, and if the board's ready, the board's ready, and if the board's not, the board's not.
I would like to put it up for action at the September 11th meeting,
Okay.
because it's just,
I don't have a problem with that. Yeah, that's
We
fine.
will do that.
The board can always say, oh, we want more time.
Sure.
For now, yeah.
Okay, we'll be ready with that.
great. So we'll move on to item 4.4, Contra Costa School of Performing Arts update.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Would you like me present for this, members and Neil, or?
I'm not sure if, we need you on here for anything, do you?
I don't think so.
Not that we don't love seeing you here, but,
I'm always happy to help, but,
don't
want
think
to make sure using the time wisely, obviously.
yeah, and I don't think there's anything else that you would need to advise us on this.
Great. All right, everyone, take care.
Thank you.
Thank you for being
My
here.
pleasure.
Mr. McChesney, would you like to give us any update there is for Contra Costa School of Performing Arts?
I don't have any substantive updates at this point outside of what was shared at the last board update. You're aware of our current monitoring practices. We'll continue to update the board on a regular basis. We're paying close attention right now to the timeline for receipt of their bridge loan, because that's a major factor in their cash flow. Their ongoing facilities plans, and really their enrollment and how it impacts their budget and any budget revisions they need to make.
When did they
So
start?
wait, okay, sorry.
When did they start?
They started on the same as 8th. They're in their second week. Sometimes they've been in school for a week or 2 weeks, something like that.
So they haven't received any of the money from the bridge loan? Is that what you?
That's
just said?
correct. It has not actually processed yet. I know they're discussing some term adjustments at the upcoming board meeting. So some of the terms in the language as we have reviewed in the recent iterations of the bridge loan, they were going back and forth about. So they don't have that money yet. No.
Oh, but I thought they had an approved agreement.
I think they do, but I think that since then there has been some back and forth about the specific terms. No one has communicated to us that that this money is in doubt, that they don't anticipate getting it, but as of right now, they do not have it.
But also it was supposed to be available to them for a year and a half. And maybe that's what they're discussing when the term would be up, because then the question in my mind is what happens at the end of that term? It was December 25.
Mhm.
And then what was the plan for that?
Mhm.
And I brought that up at the last charter committee meeting and there wasn't really any response. I mean, the executive director was here and she said she'd have to go talk to her business person or something. So, that's still a question in my mind and, looking at their board, packet that's attached here for their board meeting, that's, I guess it's tonight.
Correct.
The summary narrative says that their enrollment, it gives an enrollment number of 298,
Correct.
which is less than it was last spring.
And less than what was reported to us on the first day of school. So some of their initial enrollment has not stabilized, not materialized. The kids that they thought were just absent on the first day ended up not ever showing up, things like that. So it's usually a few weeks before you get a really clear idea of what your actual enrollment is. I know they're also still actively enrolling kiddos, but it is reduced from their current budget projections. So I know that's a big topic of conversation for us with them and at their board meeting tonight, which I'll be observing. So that's an area of concern.
Yeah, and so if that's a concern and that, what's their plan and what, this is on us to be doing the oversight. I'm very concerned. Also and I just want to say that, and I want to get more information as we go forward because we have school services talking to them. I would like to know again, what is school services thoughts now that we're here? I mean, I assume we're paying them, right? Or what?
Yes, and as I reported at the most recent board meeting, I will share with you the monthly report that we get from School Services of California. The first one will come at the end of this month.
They began working with them beginning of this month, roughly.
Correct.
No, they began, we got a report last.
So there was an
July.
initial assessment, different arrangements.
Mhm.
I shared that information with you. Then over the summer, as part of our kind of plan for this year's oversight, we contracted with School Services of California to do regular ongoing meetings with them and oversight and support, and then report back to us. We had an initial kickoff of that in late July. They started doing meetings with SPA in August, and we'll get our first report in August. So we're in fairly regular communication with the representatives from School Services of California. I just checked in with her, whatever it was, a week or so ago, about when we should expect that first report, and that was what she suggested. And then we'll get a monthly one going forward.
Said the end of the month.
Correct.
So can we get, could you forward us the report, after you get it within, maybe a week or something? Because we're not gonna have another charter meeting till later and we don't
Sure.
see anything that's on the board agenda till 3 days before. It doesn't give us time to kind of process. So where are we?
5 days.
What?
We get
5 days? All right.
Yeah.
I'm
Before our
happy to
well,
forward it on.
Required 3 days before. Anyway, whatever we get, that's great. Yeah, we get it on Friday for the Wednesday meeting, but I'm just saying, that gives you 3 days of business days if you had any questions to ask questions, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So anyway, I'd love to be able to have that before. And since we are the ones paying for them to talk to Coco Spa, seems like we have access to that information and the board should have access to it also. So another quick question, what kind of direction, or are we giving direction to school services about, what they're doing? They're obviously trying to help them out of their fiscal hole, but are we giving them any specific direction or what?
The overarching direction is to assess the budgeting practices, the assumptions as to whether they're sound or not, and the adherence to a budget moving forward, right? So part of the historical problem was a budget was set, and that budget perhaps either had unrealistic assumptions and or over the course of a year, there are major deviations from that budget, either on the revenue or the expense side, that were not accounted for, adjusted for in the moment, right? So they just kind of kept going without recognizing that there's an issue here. And then all of a sudden you're deficit spending and you're upside down at the end of the year.
Yeah.
So it's someone else to keep tabs on that, while at the same time providing you know, inside coaching, guidance to the extent appropriate in that relationship for the executive director, working in part with their back office. So it's someone who's kind of in that budgeting and rebudgeting forecasting process on a regular basis. I believe right now they're meeting once a week for just an hour meeting because we approved a certain number of hours per month. It's up to them to decide how they want to do that, but I think that's the pattern they're doing right now.
Okay, and I know they had a contract for that marketing company to help them try to recruit students. So I'd like to know, is that still in place? Are they, you know, or did they decide not to do it? I mean, I don't know what the status is, but that.
My understanding is that they did execute an agreement with that company, Mariposa. It was authorized at the board meeting. Part of the revenue associated with paying the ongoing work for that vendor is tied to the bridge loan. So they're on receipt of the bridge loan. They might be in a bit of a hiatus there with that organization.
Okay, good to know. And then, so if you can keep an eye on that. Also, this independent study contract. I'm just curious if you have any comments about that, because I was surprised to see they're hiring in, it's not independent study. I mean, the other one, there was a contract.
Edgenuity.
Well, no, there was a contract, $60,000 for a teacher.
Edgenuity.
That's Edgenuity?
Mhm.
Oh, it looked like a teacher for biology and chemistry. You're saying it's,
Edgenuity has different levels of service. They can provide a curriculum and a platform. They can provide a teacher in some cases. And it is not uncommon for any of the charters in our portfolio, or even for districts for that matter, to sometimes outsource a certificated teacher if you can't find an actual person in the immediate job market, or, you know, I suppose in some cases, if there's a strategic, financial, or operational benefit to do such. So that's what's happening there is they are contracting with Edgenuity for not only the curriculum and the platform, but the actual certificated teacher who will provide, you know, virtual instruction, probably in combination with another staff member in the actual classroom space with the students, if that makes sense.
yeah, it makes sense. It didn't say Edgenuity. It says K-12 something. So
No, I thought it did.
Elevate K-12.
Okay,
elevate.
I'm sorry, maybe that's what it was. I thought it was Edgenuity, but same concept.
All right, it's Elevate K-12. Anyway, it's just surprising to see that, but you just explained that. I just want to say I'm also hoping to watch their meeting, which is tonight, and keep an eye on this. And I'm still concerned, and we still have our notice of concern out there that hasn't been resolved. And so I think we need to be talking about what we're going to do if this doesn't resolve soon.
In as much as the school year has begun, and I think we all would agree that it's not in the best interest of students to say mid-year, well, we don't think that you're going to survive for the future. Unless they reach the point where they do not have the money to run, it would not be in the best interest of the students to take action until the end of the term, or to have action occur at the end of the term. And I think that that is going to be an ongoing concern for a while, I'm sure, because until they get themselves righted, or if it happens, fails to right the ship.
That's
Yeah.
true, but their way of righting the ship is getting more students to enroll. And they also are not, so far, they don't have the money that they said they would. So, you know, they could be, you know, going in worse and worse fiscal distress. So, anyway, it's just something we have to watch, a lot of moving parts, but we need to keep watching it.
I think that Neil's got like 5 oars in the water right now trying to do that. Right. Along with your staff.
It is a regular part of my work on a daily basis.
So, have your questions been answered that you had, so we can move on to the next item? It would be to set the.
Well, my
date.
question, just for the record, my questions aren't answered, but I brought them up and they're continuing questions. Thank you.
Well, that's true with everything that's going on with this. It's a
With this
fluid
goal.
situation and we are watching it, we being our staff are watching it extremely closely. I shouldn't say our staff, the staff, you're not our staff. So, future agenda items,
Well, Coco Spa needs to stay on there.
it will.
I don't know if I don't think we need to or want to be discussing anything related to the petitions coming up. Didn't we decide we're gonna do that in the board, not here?
Yes,
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, so that's why we're not having it here. I don't know of any other specific agenda items. If there are, I'll send them to Natalia. Before the next meeting, I guess the next biggest issue is when is the next meeting?
that's
Sorry.
what we're looking at now.
Yeah.
If all goes well with getting the MOU ready, set to be presented at the September 11th meeting, I think we'll be okay having a meeting after that. Do you agree?
Well, the only thing that's hanging is Coco Spa, and they are having a meeting tonight. So, I mean, if there's some, like, what happens if they can't get this term resolved for their loan? Then that's gonna create more of a problem.
Well, yes, it's going to create a problem for them, but we as a committee will not be able to resolve that problem for them.
I'm not trying to resolve it. I'm just saying, you know, since we're the authorizer, we might want to talk about it, but, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I think we should be talking about it more right now, but, we're not there
Yeah, well, we don't know until after
after tonight.
tonight, and we won't know regarding their bridge loan until it either is funded or not.
Yeah.
And it's
so-
all just an assumption that we would be making until,
Well, then maybe we need to have more of a conversation on the 11th at the board meeting.
what?
What depends on what happens tonight. If they're getting their money and they're getting their term resolved and, you know, they think that's smooth, then fine. But otherwise, the conversation's about their finances. We don't know yet until after tonight.
Well, I expect that tonight we won't know whether the bridge loan has been funded. But I am going to request, I guess, that as you have been doing, that you report to the board what's the current status on Coco Spa, that you don't have to bring it to us first to discuss it before bringing it to September 11th, obviously.
Yep, of course. We'll provide that update.
So in order to meet before the October meeting, the week of September 23rd, and the week of September 16th, is what's available. Not including the Fridays.
And so,
There's a,
interdistrict transfer on the 16th, right? And we don't want to do it on the 19th, which is
Yeah,
teacher of the
Teacher
year.
of the year.
Sorry, I don't want to do
I'm
it.
not,
back and forth. Okay,
I'm not really involved in that, so if it needs
I
to
am
be
going-
that day, that's fine.
I am going to ask if we not do it the week of the 16th through the 20th, because I have a very big wedding happening at my house for a friend.
It's amazing.
And
Fun.
I expect I am going to be very busy and very distracted if I'm not busy at home. So if we could do it the week of the 23rd through the
So the
27th.
23rd to the 26th.
Well, I can't do it the 23rd or 24th, but I could do it after the 24th. Wednesday, the 25th,
We
Or
can do
26th.
tentatively, oh, the 26th is really good.
Okay, so shall we do the 26th? And
Seems
what-
okay. We're also going to be busy. At that point, we're going to be busy doing our final review of our charter petition. Does that,
Uh,
does that impact Neil in any way that we should be considering? I mean,
No, I'm fine with that timing.
okay, so we were just talking about what, September 26th?
Thursday,
that's-
September 26th, we could do 10 a.m. again.
Please,
Okay,
all the traffic
let's
was
just do
miserable
that.
today. It's usually cleared up enough for everybody. I think so far what I'm gonna say tentatively, we had set it for an hour, because at this point, we don't have a lot on the, that we have to agendize for it, so. Can we schedule it for an hour instead of an hour and a half?
For Coco Spa, we could, I don't know, I think.
I don't think we need
I
an hour and a
think-
half just to discuss them, and at this point, I do not foresee that we have anything else that's pending that we need to put on there.
Well, I think we could spend an hour and a half on Coco Spa. We're just doing a very superficial discussion all the time because we don't have enough time.
Well, I think
Well,
an hour.
Schedule A and MOU discussion won't be on the agenda,
Yes.
because that'll be finished.
Mhm.
Presumably.
Chesney, is there anything else that you think that we are missing that we should be keeping an eye on? No.
No, I know, Natalia, there is, an updated version of the CSBA policy, but that has to go through the policy committee first.
Correct.
So I don't know if that'll be,
And they are supposed to be meeting, we had to reschedule, so that's supposed to be a meeting either later this month or the beginning of September, so that could be on there as well.
Is there serious changes or is it minor changes?
I have yet to do a thorough review. I did a cursory one. I didn't see anything really meaningful, so I don't anticipate like
I use
compli-
cleanup stuff.
complicated, yeah, but I'm gonna do a thorough review, so
Okay.
very soon. I owe that.
I'd like to set it for an hour.
Okay,
So we'll be meeting on the 26th at 10 a.m. And with that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting at 11:34.